Hello, hello. It's Let's Talk Tuesday, so let's talk about mental illness and romanticizing mental illness. I spoke, I believe, a couple weeks ago about how language has affected mental illness and mental disability. The careless way the diagnosis OCD is used, depression is used, anxiety is used. It's made it into an environment where, like, if I talk about my depression, I have to legitimize it and say, no, I'm not sad. I literally have depression. I literally have anxiety, like the mental illness kind, not the kind that you use to very carelessly express yourself with. I find that people who have these disabilities and mental illnesses typically have to work extra hard to be visible because of the way this language has been appropriated. There's also this belief that mental illness can make one quirky, kind of steers them into this manic pixie dream girl and making them feel more desirable. As a person who deals with something like that, it's almost hurtful for someone to say that they would wish it upon themselves, because it's like, then you really don't get it. I've also had this conversation several times, and the response makes me pretty uncomfortable. I'll say something like, I wish so-and-so artist could have gotten the help that they needed. The accommodations they needed, the accessibility they needed. And their response will be, yeah, but if they did, they wouldn't have created the art they created. But do you see what I mean? People want to assign talent to mental illness. Hence that thing that I just mentioned, like, oh, I wish I had a mental illness so I could be cool. Like, you don't have to be sick to be talented. And I think it's selfish as an audience to think that an artist must suffer in order to make good art. And I saw this great quote on House MD. House was in a mental care facility, I believe, and a therapist was speaking to him, and he said, you're scared that by taking meds you will lose your edge. Stop making the unique connection that makes you a successful doctor. House responds to him, if Van Gogh was your patient, he'd be satisfied with painting houses instead of Starry Night. And the therapist responded, Van Gogh would still be making inspiring visions of the night sky, just not from the room of this asylum. I know both his ears would be intact, and I know his life would have been better. The fact is, mental illness often harms the person that they are a part of. I don't know, this is, as Let's Talk Tuesday is all about conversation, so we can continue this conversation in the comments. Just for the record, Let's Talk Tuesday is not a day where I'm giving you hard facts. It's the day that we're just here to talk, and we're here to, like, reminisce in these ideas. And the reason that this is occurring to me specifically is because I have a lot of difficulty reaching out for help with my mental illness. Is plural. I've always been the kind of person to perform self-analysis and self-therapy, and it's gotten me very far. So my own self-therapy is how I made a really big recovery from my body dysmorphic disorder, and obviously it's still with me, but I'm not in nearly as dark of a state as I used to be in. But my depression has been getting pretty bad recently, and being triggered by my physical health and by my physical pain and by my isolation because of my physical illness. And that might be something that I need a therapist to navigate safely without causing myself harm. It might be something that I have to consider medication for. And stuff like the things that I mentioned in this video has really forced me into a very hesitant space. Not to mention my own issues. I have a lot of trust issues. I have a big distrust reason to hesitate with a therapist. I feel like any therapist that I try and see is not going to understand where I'm coming from, or I'm not going to communicate myself well, or it's going to do more harm than it will do good. Seeking help is something that should be encouraged, not something that is frowned upon because you think that it's going to make me a better artist. You don't know what kind of artist I would be with a healthy mind. It's pretty daunting for me to think that one can only be a creative artist if they're sick. I think that's something that people say to try to make you feel better. Like, sure, you're sick, but it can inspire your art, or can inspire your writing, and all that stuff. It can, of course, because we're going to take from our lives no matter what is in our lives. But depression can literally kill you. So, what's more important? Surviving, or potentially having a very different subject for your art, or style for your art? As usual, I love for Let's Talk Tuesday to start a conversation in the comments, so please leave me a comment and let me know what you think about people romanticizing mental illness and discouraging getting help, which is basically the roundup of what we talked about today. And I will see you all eventually. Bye.